Okay, so here's another response video to your wonderful videos. I've got a whole batch of them over here. So about the render under Caesar that which is Caesar and render under God that which is God. I've actually always really understood that, and again, this is me praying with my heart, and so this is what I saw in that story, or what, resonated with me, which was to be law-abiding, render under Caesar, obey the laws. However, there's a hierarchy also. Render under Caesar that which is Caesar's, obey the laws. The next part is render unto God that which is God's. And I do believe that tells us that if we have to break the law to obey God, then that is what we do. And our early, the early sects of Christianity did do that. They, hid in the catacombs and practiced their religion under oppression. So I do think that that is something we're called to do. However, I think that, well, and also, never mind the civil rights movement and those things in terms of breaking laws. I don't think that, I think that has to be a careful decision made. It's an individual thing. And so then my father posed this question to me. Now, this is a long time ago in a faraway place. But when I was a kid, they would bomb abortion clinics, like the real fundamentalist American Christians, and that's wrong. We can talk about abortion in a different situation, but that's wrong. And so my dad said, "Well, what about these people who go and do this, and then they say God told them to go bomb an abortion clinic?" And I said, "Well, you do the crime in the name of Jesus, you do the time in the name of Jesus." And I think that's what this tells us as well, is that you obey God, and you don't evade, you don't lie, you don't conspire to hide your actions, because you're doing those actions in the name of God, and you're willing to pay the price for it. This happened to me. When I was becoming very sick with my mental illness, Anyway, I had a physical assault with someone who richly deserved it, okay? But when they brought me down to the police station and asked me, what's with this statement this guy made, I told the truth. I totally told the truth. And there were grave consequences for that. Not that I went to, I was in the buckets, but I never went to I didn't do 2 years less a day or anything. I just was in the buckets overnight. And I had a year's probation, and it essentially has cost me my teaching career, although the depression had a big part to do with that. But if you've clocked a 20-year-old in the knee with a 12-inch crescent wrench, a lot of southern schools just aren't going to hire you anymore. So, but the truth that's what I did. If it's worth doing, if you're called to do it, then you have to say you did it, and you have to pay the price. In this part of the, this world, it's price. So that's why I think that render under Caesar that which is Caesar's. Here's another thing, that there's kind of a subtext to this piece where, they're shaking the gold coins at Christ and kind of teasing him and saying, this is Caesar's. This valuable item is Caesar's. And Jesus, with nothing in his hands, is offering, the ephemeral treasure of having a relationship with God, of receiving forgiveness, of the resurrection. And so he says this, he devalues the gold by saying that's Caesar's, that's this worldly, and what is God's is greater than this world. And there's actually, and I don't know this just came off my head as I was looking at this, but our treasures are stored up in heaven. I'm sure it says that somewhere in the Bible, but I can't figure out where. Here's another interesting thing, is that this is sort of the first notion of separation of church and state, which I think is essential, and I think that if Christians gave it a little bit of thought, they would really understand why this is essential. Being a Christian is a voluntary, personal, voluntary act, and it's something that actually has to be done every single day. Resurrection is a daily thing, that at the end of the day, we have to put down our grudges, we have to put down our burdens, we have to put down our own wrongdoings, and part of putting down your own wrongdoings is acknowledging your shortcomings, which is difficult to do because so much of our self-worth is wrapped up in how we believe other people see us, and we still kind of want to do shitty things and not have anybody know about it. Now, I'm not saying I'm a saint, but the shitty things I do them, and they're mine. And I if I did it, I did it, you know, and I'm not gonna well, and again, we call Jesus, his other name is truth. And so I'm not going to lie to cover up behavior that I felt was worthy to engage in. And so my dignity comes from God. I render unto Caesar whatever, and unto God I bring my truth self. Now, a little bit later in that video, you start talking about government. And I know you really have a thing about the government. I don't really have a thing about government. I've known a lot of people who worked in public service, in government, people who worked in both elected positions and worked for elected officials. These are people who, first of all, can somehow squeeze out the humanity and be human beings while pushing papers and crunching numbers all day long. Paperwork that is so boring that, my lord, I avoid. I mean, I'm so glad I don't own property, because if I had to fill out tax papers for my property, my house taxes, that's awful. But people do it, and they're elected officials, and their responsibility really is to advocate for the people in their district or area or whatever, however it's divided up. Yes, there is corruption. However, corruption is not cured by simply getting rid of government, because then what you have are a bunch of different systems of corruption. You know, just ask the people living in Bangkok, okay? You've got a bunch of different systems of corruption working. You've got the police corrupt separately from this, from that, from the next thing. The other thing that's nice about government are things like sewers and fire trucks. And not always police, but, you know, police, ambulances, curb cuts, streets, street lights, traffic lights. You know, the list goes on and on and on. It is not a dictatorship. I've talked to people who have I've known people who have actually lived in dictatorships. And one fellow I knew, he lived in Romania under Ceausescu. I knew him in the United States, and he would wake up screaming because of his memories of having grown up there and the things he experienced in terms of, like, police coming in the middle of the night. So we don't have that. And then I did talk about the value of regulation. I love the fact that the bed sizes are standard and the chairs all fit under the table, people. And that has to do with regulation. And like the fact that, you know, they don't make children's pajamas out of flammable material anymore. The fact that they can't dump, you know, all kinds of pollution into the air anymore. I'm all for that stuff. And some folks out there just not old enough to remember what it used to be like. Because I grew up in I was like 7 or 8 in 1980. Okay, I remember when, before all the EPA stuff and the cap and trade stuff went down in the United States. I mean, the rain here in Canada, from what we got on our news reports, would strip the paint off of a car because it was so filled with, you know, just like pollutants. So anyway, that's my subjects on Caesar, the government, doing the crime, doing the time, telling the truth. Like, I do believe in telling the truth. I'm not saying you have to tell everybody everything all the time. You can decline to answer. Or you can also say, here's a nice southern one I love. It's not my place to say. Because I haven't said I don't know, and I haven't said I won't say. I'm just saying it's not my place to say. And so then that's a nice way to shutting people down. And you don't have to say more than that. Don't let the social awkwardness fall upon the other person, because you can say it's just not my place to sing. So, anyway, I love you guys. Love you all so much, and I hope you're enjoying some of these response videos. I'll try to put I don't know if the link worked for the other video where I was responding to my friend Pixel, but I will try to do another link here. So, anyway, have a very good night. We love you. I love you. And I hope everyone's doing very well. Thank you so much. Good night.